My mother looked the young gate guard dead in the eye and said five words that would detonate 30 years of silence. She's not my daughter. Just my guest. She didn't even look at me when she said it. 20 years in uniform. And to her, I was still nobody. Just swipe her through. Let's go. But the guard kept his flashlight on my card. The beam stopped on the gold seal in the corner, and I watched every drop of color drain out of his face. He stepped back. His heels cracked together. His hand flew to his brow, and he screamed into the red phone. We have a flag officer at the gate. My mother laughed and called him crazy. She had no idea that the woman she just called a guest outranked every single person at that gala. And she had no idea what I was about to do next. Here's the lesson this story will leave in your chest. People who only love you when you stay small never loved you at all. If you've ever swallowed your pride to keep peace with a family that never saw your worth, stay with me to the end. Like this video? Drop a comment with the word "seen" and subscribe, because this story was made for people exactly like you. My mother looked the young sailor dead in the eye and said, "She is not my daughter. She is just my guest." She said it the way you would wave off a fly. She did not turn her head. She did not blink. The guard could not have been 22 years old, and she spoke past him like he was furniture. Just swipe her through and let us go. 30 years, a desk clerk, and she still cannot follow simple instructions. The guard kept his flashlight on me anyway. Procedure. The beam slid across my photograph, down to the corner of my identification card, and stopped on the gold seal. I watched the color drain out of his face like someone had pulled a plug. He stepped back. His heels cracked together so hard the sound bounced off the guardhouse wall. His hand snapped to his brow. Then he lunged for the red phone, and his voice came out an octave too high. Gate to command. We have a flag officer on site. I repeat, a flag officer is at the gate. My mother laughed. An actual laugh. Sweetheart, you have lost your mind. She files paperwork. She had no idea that the 30 years she had spent looking past me had just, that very second, run out of road. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. The people who have earned the right call me Nora. Before I tell you who that gold seal belongs to, and why my own mother spent 3 decades pretending I was not in the room, you need to understand one thing. This story is not really about revenge. It is about the difference between being useful to people and being seen by them. If you have ever bled for family that treated your love like a utility bill, invisible until it stopped, then stay with me. What that gold seal set in motion is going to matter to you. I will keep my childhood short because the wound is simple and you already know its shape. We lived in Dayton, Ohio. My father, Walt Whitfield, had been a shipyard welder before he moved us inland. He was a quiet man with grease, worked so far into his knuckles it never washed out. He had exactly one commandment. Only the things you can hold in your hand are worth anything. No church. No scripture. Just that. When I was 10 years old, I built a destroyer out of scrap solder and bottle caps for the county science fair, and I won first place. I held the certificate up to him with both hands. He looked at it, found nothing in it he could grip, shrugged one shoulder like a piston, and walked away. 3 minutes later, my younger brother Brad came through the door with a third-place ribbon from a 50-yard dash. My mother! Lorraine crossed that kitchen like the floor was on fire. She kissed his forehead. She kissed the ribbon. She set it on top of the refrigerator where the whole world could admire it. I stood just outside the picture. I learned to live in the margin. At 18, I ironed my Naval Academy acceptance letter flat. Full scholarship. One of a handful of women chosen out of thousands. I laid it on that same table. My mother picked it up with 2 fingers like it might be sticky and said, "The Navy, so they will teach you to file paperwork for free. Just do not embarrass this family more than you already do." I should have flipped the table. Instead, I made a decision that cost me the next 30 years. I decided to shrink, to take up as little room as possible, so my mother could orbit my brother without my shadow getting in the way. I folded that letter in half, zipped it into my backpack, and walked out without a single tear. What I never told anyone, what I am telling you, is what I actually did for a living. I am a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. My specialty is explosive ordnance disposal. For most of my career, that meant I was the diver they sent into black water when the math said nobody was coming back. 40 feet under the Persian Gulf. The water wrapped around my body like wet cement. Visibility was 18 inches. The temperature sat barely above the line where a body starts to fail. I held my own heartbeat down to 60 beats a minute, not because I was calm, but because the device strapped to the foreign ship's hull, 3 feet from my face, would detonate if it felt a vibration above a certain frequency. One tremor in my fingers, and my dive team would become a debris field. I set the cutting tool around the detonation circuit. 3 pounds of pressure. Steady. I severed the wire. The red light on the device went black. Death powered down. I broke the surface, ripped off the oxygen mask, and tasted blood where the pressure had split my lip from the inside. Out there. I was not invisible. Out there. I was the last word. And every month, the money I earned for that. The hazard pay the Navy gives you precisely because there is a real chance you will not be alive to spend it. Flowed straight home through automatic transfers I had set up, so no one would ever have to lower themselves to ask. Over 15 years, it came to more than $400,000. It paid for my mother's so-called boutique investments. It paid Brad's rent when his fake consulting company stalled. Twice. It paid for his wife Whitney's renovations. His leased office in a glass tower. The whole performance. Not one of them ever said thank you. Most of them genuinely believed I was a clerk in a windowless basement somewhere. They cashed every cent while believing, with total certainty, that I was as nothing. I told myself that was love. Told myself a saint stays quiet. Here's the first thing I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with it. If the people you love only kept loving you because you stayed small, was it ever really you they loved, or only the room you left empty for them? I did not have the courage to ask that question for 30 years. The invitation is what finally pulled the thread loose. 3 weeks before that night at the gate, I was standing in my mother's kitchen, and I saw a flash of cream-colored cardstock in the trash, half buried under coffee grounds. I fished it out. Embossed across the top was the seal of the United States Navy. The recipient line, in government type, read Rear Admiral Eleanor Whitfield. Inside was an engraving. Guest of honor and keynote speaker. The National Explosive Ordnance Disposal Memorial Gala. The single most prestigious night in my entire profession. Admirals attend. Senators attend. Allied chiefs of defense attend. The invitation had come to my mother's house because the Navy still listed it as my home of record from 20 years ago. My mother breezed past, plucked it out of my hand without breaking stride, and curled her lip. I threw that out for a reason. It is a scam. They print fake military titles on the envelope to fool gullible people. You answer phones. Eleanor, what on earth would you be doing getting a letter addressed to an admiral? She tossed it back at the trash. It missed, and it landed face up on the linoleum. The words Rear Admiral staring at the ceiling. Then she made it worse. She pulled up a VIP ticket on her phone, one she had spent 2 weeks working a woman from her book club to get, and announced that she and Brad would be attending that very gala, so Brad could network with defense investors. She pointed one acrylic nail at me. You will wear something dark and plain. You will carry my bag. You will walk 3 steps behind me. And you will not speak to a single general unless one speaks to you first. I will not have you embarrassing me. I want to say something plainly here, because it is a lesson, and the whole story turns on it. Contempt and ignorance often travel together, but they are not the same thing. My mother was not only cruel, she was certain, and certainty that has never once been challenged hardens into something that feels exactly like the truth. I decided, that night, to stop arguing with it. I would let her steer her own ship, at full speed, into a reef she could not see. The night of the gala. I did not wear my uniform. I pulled my hair into a regulation bun, put on a plain dark dress, and slid my access card, the one with the gold flag officer seal, deep into the lining of my handbag, where she would never think to look. 5 o'clock in the evening, we rolled up to the entry control point on a closed military installation. My mother thrust her phone at the windshield, reeling off the names of colonels she had looked up on the drive. Brad sprawled in the back seat, scrolling his phone, laughing at something that was probably a meme about money he did not have. The young guard, his name tape read Hodge, ignored my mother entirely. He leaned down and put his light on me. Standard. Check every occupant. My mother huffed. She is just +1. She is not my daughter. She is just my guest. 20 years in a uniform, and she is still a desk jockey. Swipe her through. She is nobody worth holding us up for. That is where my silence ended. I handed Seaman Hodge my card through the window. The beam tracked across the laminate, past my face, and stopped on the gold seal. I watched it land. His pupils blew wide. The blood went out of his face the way a tide pulls back before a wave. He rocked on his heels. And then 30 weeks of drilled instinct took the wheel. His heels cracked together. His hand shot to his brow. He spun, hit the guardhouse, and grabbed the red phone. And that is the call you heard at the very top of this story. My mother laughed her disbelieving laugh and leaned across me. Stand down. Soldier, you have made a mistake. She is just my daughter. File clerk. The card is a mix-up. And then the guardhouse door opened a second time. A man stepped out into the floodlights. Master Chief Petty Officer Frank Mercer. 30 years in, a face like cracked saddle leather. I had pulled Frank Mercer out of a burning ordnance pit outside Fallujah in 2007. I dragged him 40 meters across rubble with a piece of shrapnel buried in my own forearm. On the gurney afterward, he had sworn to me that for the rest of his life, anyone who served near me would know exactly who I was. He recognized me, and his whole face broke open like sunrise on a flight deck. He marched to my window, came to attention exactly 6 feet off, and gave me a salute you could have put on a recruiting poster. Admiral Whitfield, ma'am, it is an honor. The fleet has been waiting on its guest of honor all evening. We have your escort standing by. The air went out of the car. My mother's hands fused to the wheel. Her knuckles went from pink to chalk in 2 seconds. In the back seat, Brad made a sound I have never heard a grown man make before. A wet, strangled rattle, like a man choking on his own version of reality. I leaned toward the window. At ease, Master Chief. Good to see you are still standing. I opened my own door. My mother did not move to help. She could not move. I stepped out onto the pavement, straightened the hem of that plain dark dress, and looked back at the 2 people who had spent 30 years calling me nobody. I said nothing. I squared my shoulders and walked through the checkpoint, and I did not look back. The ballroom doors opened, and I walked into a wall of dress whites. 1,000 officers stood up at once. 1,000 chairs scraping marble sounds like a wave hitting a seawall. The fleet commander, Admiral Thomas Vance, 4 stars, more ribbons than chests to hold them, crossed the floor, took my hand in both of his, and said, Nora, we have been looking forward to this all year. Behind me, a screen lit up 20 feet tall, my service photograph, and the words Guest of Honor, Rear Admiral Eleanor Whitfield. My mother was seated 40 feet from that screen, at a back corner table, the name cards handwritten because she and Brad had barely made the list. Her face was the color of wet newspaper. And here is the part nobody saw coming. Brad was wearing a Navy officer's uniform, not a costume, a real tailored set of service dress, with a lieutenant commander's stripes on the sleeve, and a rack of ribbons over the left breast, a bronze star, a combat action ribbon. He had walked into a room full of the actual men and women who earned those exact awards, wearing them, and he was working the edges of the crowd, telling investors he was consulting on a classified naval program with Admiral Mitchell. I knew Admiral Mitchell. Vice Admiral Carl Mitchell reported directly to me 48 hours earlier. He had stood at attention and asked my authorization to clear a mine corridor in contested water. He called me ma'am, and he waited for my nod before he moved. My brother was not padding his resume. My brother was committing a federal crime. Let me teach you something real, because part of why I am telling this story is so you will know it. In the United States, wearing military medals you did not earn in order to obtain money or a tangible benefit is a crime under the Stolen Valor Act of 2013. It is not a personality flaw. It is fraud, and it is prosecutable. Every man and woman in that ballroom had paid for those ribbons in blood, in marriages, in nights they do not talk about. To pin them on for a sales pitch is to steal from the dead. I climbed to the podium and gave my keynote. The hall went combat briefing silent, the kind of quiet where you can hear a program slide off someone's lap. I spoke about the people who walk into the dark so others can walk safely in daylight, about courage that operates without applause. Then I found my mother in the back corner, and I let my voice drop. Silence can be a mission, but it should never be a sentence handed to you by the very people who were supposed to see you first. My mother put her head down and stared at her own lap for the rest of the night, but near a side door. I caught a movement. Brad's wife, Whitney, was watching him work the crowd in those stolen ribbons. and she was not smiling. She had her phone out, and she was filming. She caught my eye across 40 feet of ballroom. She gave me the smallest nod I have ever seen. I refused the ride home. I called a staff car, black government plates, and rode back alone in the dark. On the way out, my friend Captain Ruth Avery caught me in a side corridor and said the thing I had been hiding from for 30 years. Ruth pulled me out of a collapsed building in 2008, so she is allowed. She crossed her arms. Let me get this straight. You let your mother drive the guest of honor through a checkpoint in the passenger seat. You let her call your own sailor's admiral nobody to his face, and you absorbed it like it was weather. I watched you defuse a daisy chain in a sandstorm without blinking. Your mother says one cruel sentence, and you fold like a recruit on day one. How much more blood are you going to wire home to people who use you as a bank machine and spit on the receipt? That hit like a flashbang. All light, all at once. Nowhere to hide. I had spent 3 decades dressing fear up as humility, calling self-erasure a sacrifice. And here is the thing I most need you to hear. Because somebody listening right now is living it. Absorbing cruelty from people who are supposed to love you is not strength. It is teaching them, one silence at a time, that you can be erased. So in the back of that car, I gave myself a new order. Terminate all supply lines. Effective immediately. I opened the banking application. 12 automatic transfers. The monthly wire to my mother. The quarterly payment to Brad's credit line. The insurance on a Porsche I had never sat in. Each one a transfusion that kept their illusion breathing. I worked the way I work a live device. Cold, in sequence. Irreversible. Cancel. 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 12 severed arteries. Then I emailed them both. No greeting. A directive. I will never again be the anchor buried in the mud for this family to stand on. All support ends at midnight. This is not a negotiation. I attached one document, my unclassified service record. Rear Admiral, Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor. 3 combat deployments. Within 1 hour, the reversals started landing on them, one after another. My mother's premium card declined at a steakhouse in front of 4 women from her book club. Brad's investors, the ones he had been dazzling, ran a real background check before signing and found no security clearance, no service record, nothing. The man in the lieutenant commander's uniform had never spent a single day in the Navy. And then the third reversal, the one I did not engineer. Whitney called me, not crying for help, offering it. Nora, I have known for 2 years, Whitney said, and her voice was steadier than I had ever heard it. He made me play along. I started keeping things, receipts, photographs of the uniform, recording of him telling a banker he led a platoon. She had built a file in a shared drive, terrified, waiting for someone with the standing to be believed. I have a daughter, she said. I could not let her grow up thinking that is what a man is. There it was. The person everyone would have cast as my enemy turned out to be another woman the same lie had been crushing, just on a different floor of the same house. Whitney was not an accomplice. She was a hostage who had been documenting her own captivity. I told her to take everything to the base legal office. Stolen valor for financial gain is not a family matter. It is a federal one. Then I told her the thing I most needed her to hear. You are not responsible for protecting a grown man from the truth. You are responsible for protecting that little girl. You already did the brave part. Now let go. A week later, my mother showed up at my office. No appointment. She walked past my aide and 2 checkpoints and planted herself in front of my desk with dried mascara on both cheeks and a speech she had clearly rehearsed in the car. No apology. She opened with the only tool she had ever mastered, guilt as a battering ram. One bad night and you throw away your own family. Your father would roll over in his grave. Brad has not eaten in 3 days. Is this what 20 years of service taught you? How to destroy the people who raised you? I did not stand. I folded my hands and watched her the way I watch a radar contact of unknown intent. Patient, waiting for it to classify itself. I let the silence stretch until her rehearsed sobs stuttered and stalled, like an engine running dry. Then I went to my safe, took out a single sealed citation, and set it on the glass in front of her. It hit the desk like a gavel. You want to talk about Dad. Dad said only the things you can hold in your hand are worth anything. Hold this. Her hands shook as she read it. Entered mine-laden water under enemy fire to locate and neutralize multiple explosive devices. directly saving the lives of 11 service members. The paper slipped from her fingers and drifted to the desk like a leaf. And then I did the thing she did not expect. I asked the question I had never once asked in 30 years. Mom, not what? Why? What happened to you that made you decide a daughter is worth less than a son? She sat down, hard, like her legs had been cut. And for the first time in my life, my mother told me the truth. She had grown up the oldest of 5 in a coal town in West Virginia when her brother's school fees came due. She was the one pulled out in the 8th grade to work. Because, she said, and her voice cracked on it, girls were the ones you spent on other people. Her own father told her at 14 that her job was to be useful and quiet. She had been so good at being useful and quiet that by the time she had a daughter of her own, she did not know any other shape to pour a girl into. I want to be careful here because I am not handing you an excuse. Understanding why someone hurt you is not the same as deciding it was acceptable. Those are 2 different rooms, and you are allowed to stand in one without ever entering the other. But here is the human truth underneath all of it. Cruelty is very often just pain that was never allowed to heal, passed down to the next person who cannot say no. My mother was not a monster who chose me. She was a frightened girl who was never seen, raising a daughter she did not know how to see. 2 days later, the family attorney, Mr. Harold Crane, called. He had been holding something since my father died 16 years ago, with instructions to release it only when, in his words, Eleanor finally stops hiding. He handed me a sealed envelope in my father's blocky welder's hand. Inside was a cassette tape and an index card. The card said, "Play it where she can hear." So I brought it to my mother's kitchen, and I pressed play. And my father's voice, gone 16 years, filled that room. "Lori, if you are hearing this, I am gone." And our girl finally let herself be loud. I never had the words out loud. You know that about me. But I cut out every clipping. I laminated her science fair paper. I kept the ribbon she did not win for, because she earned everything that ribbon was supposed to mean and never got the kiss for it. Nora is the anchor of this family. The strongest steel I ever held was her. I should have said so to her face. Do not make my mistake. Tell her while you can. My mother folded over the table and wept. Not the theatrical sobbing she had used as a weapon for 30 years, but the ugly, airless crying of a person who has just learned that the foundation of her whole life was made of paper. My father, the man who worshipped only what his hands could grip, had seen the steel in me from the very first day. He had simply buried his tenderness in the one place he trusted, because tenderness was a language he never learned to say out loud. I want to tell you how this ends, because you have earned a real ending, not just a satisfying one. Brad was not dragged off in handcuffs to make you cheer. What happened was quieter. And I think better. With Whitney's file, the legal office had him cold, and he was given a choice men like him rarely get. Full prosecution, or a path. He took the path. He surrendered the ribbons. He sat across a table from a real Bronze Star recipient, a young man of 26 with a prosthetic leg, and listened to what that medal actually cost. And for once, he had no line to deliver. He does court-mandated service now at a veterans transition program, the genuine kind, helping people who served file the paperwork they are owed. The first honest work of his adult life. Whitney left with her daughter, and she is doing fine. And my mother. At the summer reunion, the living room wall, the one papered for decades with Brad's ribbons, was bare. Every pin pulled. My mother stood up before the meal, gripped the table to keep steady, and said, in front of every aunt and cousin who had ever laughed at me over Thanksgiving turkey, "This is my daughter, Rear Admiral Eleanor Whitfield. She dove into minefields and disarmed death with her bare hands to protect people she will never meet. For 30 years, I made her invisible. I told her she was nothing, because that is what was done to me, and I never had the courage to break the chain. I am breaking it now. One introduction, precise, public, honest. It filled a hole that took 30 years to carve and 30 seconds to name. I did not move back in. I did not pretend the past had not happened. We rebuilt slowly, with boundaries. Sunday calls where she asks how I am and waits for the answer. Love without boundaries is not love. It is just a door with no lock. But a door with a lock can finally be opened on purpose. That is what we did. Then I passed the steel forward. I started a small scholarship at the Academy for young women who are the first in their families to serve, the ones told in 1,000 quiet ways that they are just the +1. The first recipient is a 19-year-old named Casey, who built a robot out of junk because no one would buy her parts. When I handed her the letter, she held it with both hands, the corners already going soft and damp, exactly the way I once held mine. So here is what 30 years and one gold seal taught me, and I will say it plainly, because somebody out there needs to hear it tonight. Your worth is not a function of how loudly the people around you acknowledge it. I was a rear admiral the whole time my mother thought I was a clerk. The gold seal did not make me valuable. It only made me visible. You may be living right now in a house, or a marriage, or a job, where your real worth has never once been read out loud. That silence is not evidence about you. It is evidence about the people who have not looked. Unconditional sacrifice does not automatically produce love. Very often it produces entitlement. When you give and never set a limit, you are not teaching people to cherish you. You are teaching them that you can be taken from without cost. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. Boundaries are what make love safe to give. And cruelty is usually inherited pain looking for somewhere to land. Understanding that did not excuse one thing my mother did, but it let me stop believing something was wrong with me and start seeing the chain I happened to be standing in, so I could break it instead of passing it on. Every human being carries dignity that does not have to be earned and cannot be revoked by someone's bad opinion. Not the desk clerk, not the gate guard who has been in 6 months. Being a person is the only credential that was ever required. If you have ever been the plus one at your own table, in your own family, in your own life, hear me. Pride is not how much you can endure in silence. It is born the exact moment you stop protecting other people's lies and start defending your own truth. You are allowed to take up space. You were always allowed. If even one line of this landed in your chest, do 3 things for me right now. Press the like button so this reaches the next person who needs it tonight. Subscribe, because we tell one of these stories every week, and the next one might be yours. And tell me in the comments, when did you finally stop shrinking and demand to be seen? One honest warning before you go. Setting a boundary with people who have taken you for granted will not feel like peace at first. It will feel like an earthquake, guilt, phone calls, accusations, a chorus of voices saying you have become cold. That storm is not proof you did the wrong thing. It is proof of how long you let the wrong thing go on. Hold the line anyway. The earthquake is only the sound of a foundation made of paper finally falling, so you can build the next one out of something you can actually hold in your hand. I am Nora Whitfield. Thank you for finally seeing me. Now go let somebody see you. So what does a gold seal, a frozen guard, and 30 years of silence really leave us with? It leaves us with this. Your worth was never measured by how loudly the people around you admitted it. I was a rear admiral the entire time my own mother believed I was a clerk. The seal on my card didn't make me valuable. It only made me visible. And maybe you are living right now in a home, a marriage, or a job where your real worth has never once been spoken out loud. Hear me carefully. That silence is not evidence about you. It is evidence about the people who never bothered to look. The second truth is harder. Unconditional sacrifice does not automatically create love. Very often, it creates entitlement. When you give and never draw a line, you are not teaching people to treasure you. You are quietly teaching them that you can be taken from without cost. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. Boundaries are the very thing that makes love safe to give. The kindest thing I ever did for my family was the day I finally said no. And the last truth is the one that set me free. Cruelty is almost always inherited pain, looking for somewhere to land. The woman who erased me was once a girl who was erased first, who never got to grieve it, who handed the wound down because no one ever taught her how to set it down. Understanding that did not excuse a single thing she did to me, but it let me stop believing something was broken inside me and start seeing the chain I was standing in so that I could be the one to break it instead of passing it on. Every human being carries a dignity that does not have to be earned and cannot be canceled by someone's bad opinion of you. The clerk in the basement and the admiral on the stage are owed the very same respect, because being a person is the only credential that was ever required. So if you have ever been the plus one, at your own table, in your own family, in your own life, remember this. Pride is not how much you can endure in silence. It is born the exact moment you stop protecting other people's lies and start defending your own truth. You are allowed to take up space. You always were. If this story moved something in you, please like it so it can reach the next person who needs to hear it tonight. Share it with someone who has been made to feel invisible. Leave a comment and tell me, when did you finally stand up and demand to be seen? And subscribe. Because every week we tell another story for the people the world keeps overlooking. Your story might be the next one we tell. This content was researched, crafted, and edited by hand by our team, created to carry real meaning and a lasting lesson worth holding on to.